Hi, and welcome to this webinar, Integrating Case and Team-Based Learning into Your Programmes with Western University. My name is Kate Cook from the Case Centre and I'm your host today. As some of you will know, the Case Centre is a non-profit organisation and a charity, and our mission is to advance the case method worldwide in business and management education. We are dedicated to supporting the case community, and our webinar programme is just one of the ways that we do this. So before we get started today, two very quick housekeeping points. We've got lots of participants from around the world today, so we've muted everybody. However, we would like it to be an interactive session and the presenters will let you know how they'll manage this. We are also recording the webinar and you'll receive a link to it in a follow-up email that will be sent out tomorrow. So it gives me great pleasure to hand over to our presenters. Enjoy.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for having us today. We're all very excited to be here. So we know that, as Kate said, there's people from all over the world, and we're excited to start to get a little bit of a sense of where everyone is from and what everybody is doing with their case teaching. But we're going to start with introducing ourselves. So my name is Shannon Sibbald, and I work in a couple places. What you'll find in common from all four presenters is we're all from Western University, which is situated in Southwestern Ontario, Canada. And we all teach in various programs, faculties, departments, largely using the team-based and case-based method. And that's really what we're here to talk to you about today. So my group that I predominantly teach in, and what we're going to do is the four of us are going to explain where we predominantly teach. And so you can get a sense of our background and hopefully start to think about questions you might ask us. So I teach undergraduate students in their third and fourth year in a health sciences program. So these are students who are training to most likely go forward and become some sort of healthcare professional, be it a physician, occupational therapist, physiotherapist, etc. And I also teach our Masters of Public Health students. So these are students who are coming back for a professional degree. And these are students who come from often a health training or a health background, but are here to further their education specifically in public health. So I'll let my other three colleagues introduce themselves. And if you don't mind, as we're doing our introduction, just pop your own little hello in the chat and tell us where you're from. We'd love to see the variety of where everyone's from. Nicole.
Perfect. I'm up next. So my name's Nicole Campbell, and I also teach in a variety of capacities with different types of students. So mainly the students I'm working with, they're enrolled in a program called Interdisciplinary Medical Sciences. And so I work with fourth year students, and very similar to Shannon, in the medical science group, they all have aspirations to go to, various different, careers. And so they might want to go into medicine, dentistry, physiotherapy, they might go to grad school, all these different places. And then more recently, we've started up a interdisciplinary course-based master's program as well. And so I direct that program, I oversee it, and, team-based learning has been really, critical and foundational in our program, both for undergrad and grad.
Okay, I guess I'm up next. I'm Mark Speechley. I'm an epidemiologist, professor of epidemiology and biostatistics at the University of Western Ontario. And I spent the majority of my career teaching undergraduate and introductory graduate students in epidemiology, including medical and dental students. For the last 10 years, I've been a recovering lecturer because I've been with the Master of Public Health program that we started about 10 years ago, based on the case method.
Great. Thanks, Mark. I am Nicole Haggerty. I am, if there's one of these things that's not quite like the others, it would probably be me in this group. But these are great colleagues of mine. I teach at the Ivy Business School, another big case publishing house. I have been teaching with cases for my entire academic career, which now is about 30 plus years. I've had the opportunity to teach at every level in our business school, undergraduate, graduate, executive. I've also had the opportunity to teach case writing and case teaching workshops, including some of my colleagues here. I tried to count how many faculty I might have helped develop their case teaching, case writing skills. I think it's north of 1,000 people over the years in various workshops around the world. And I've recently taken on the responsibility of assistant dean mentorship at our school, which includes helping to develop case teaching, case writing skills. And so I'm delighted to be here with my colleagues. Thank you.
Great. And so it's so wonderful to hear those introductions of my colleagues and to see the chats coming in of where everyone's from. It's really kind of mind-blowing that we have people from all over the world joining us today. So we've set out our objectives, and this is maybe why you joined us today. And so we have these 6 objectives that we're hoping to cover in our talk today. We're with you for an hour. We really want this to be about you, though, and what you want to learn from us, and hopefully get some skills and some ideas for how you can transform your own program. So it seems that a lot of you already do case teaching. And so what we're going to do is give you a broad overview of what we do at our program, give you some ideas of how we implement team-based and simulation-based learning. And then Nicole Haggerty is going to bring it home and focus a little bit more on discussion. So please keep the questions coming in. There's 4 of us, so we'll all be manning the chat, and you're welcome to set your own objectives for today. Let us know what you want to learn, and hopefully we can take our time in doing that. You will also receive, when you receive the video, links to some of our case books that are open access and freely available to anybody who wants to use them, as well as some of our publications that we've done from the work. So we're really, really excited to be here, and let's just get started. I'm going to start us off by giving you just a really quick overview of what is public health. And I think it's important to understand public health. That's the setting that most of us teach in, and in appreciating why case-based learning is a really appropriate method to be doing in public health. So public health, different than public health care. So public health in the context is a unique, very complicated, very complex field with, some have said, over 25 unique disciplines that are coming together to basically support the health of a population. So we promote and protect the health of people and the communities where they live, learn, work, and play. Public health often is synonymous with injury prevention or wellness promotion, and a lot of this is done through promoting or encouraging healthy behaviors. And as I mentioned, it's usually at the societal or population level. And you can see some of the words in the word cloud there that maybe you would have heard of that sometimes come up when we think about what is public health. And certainly over the past few years, we've had no shortage of examples of the importance of public health. But what's also very, I would suggest, not unique to public health, but something that we really bring home to our students, is the importance of shared decision-making. So this is where I think we can all agree that most fields require a shared decision-making framework. We're not making decisions in isolation. We're needing to think about the context, the people, the problems. And in public health, we often call the challenges that we deal with wicked problems. So why do we call them wicked problems? It's not like a throwback to the 1980s or 90s and wicked cool problems. No, instead we're talking about problems that often have no agreed definition and no agreed solution. So you're trying to solve very complex wicked problems with a diverse group of professionals who often have conflicting goals, conflicting training. And this group of professionals are working together to come to some sort of solution. It requires communication, engagement, the sharing of power and leadership. And oftentimes, as is the case in our class, we try to mimic this, and it's the same in the real world with public health especially. Individuals are navigating confusing, sometimes unimportant, and often incomplete information as a group. So what we end up doing with our team-based and case-based learning is really trying to promote and bring across this idea of the importance of a balanced, team-based approach to decision-making to deliver the services that we're trying to deliver to these complex populations. So that's just a very high overview background of where we are coming from with public health. And I'm going to turn it over to Mark to talk a little bit more about our take on case-based pedagogy.
Thank you, Shannon. Yes, as I said in my introduction, we started a case-based MPH program about 10 years ago, and I've learned an awful lot, and I'm still learning. Could we have the next slide, please? So what is a case and case-based learning? This was something that we dealt with from the very beginning. If you look at the business education, business management tradition, it's often a formally written 12 to 15 page teaching case that comes with a teaching note. And that's kind of what I would call the highest, purest form of a case in case-based learning. You can also use source documents, though. For example, an executive summary from a conference proceeding, something that summarizes a big complex issue, give it to the students ahead of time and have them read it for discussion. Or maybe one of the most powerful aspects of the case method is you can rip the headline from this morning's paper and bring it in, and it really brings today's problems into the classroom in a way that lecturing doesn't really allow. In the case example 1 and 2, you provide it pre-class, but in the case 3, you just you share the information during the class session. In any event, we're trying to get into deep discussion as opposed to unidirectional didactic teaching. So here's a case, the case of the case-based Master of Public Health program. And in 2010, we got together and to plan this new program, and several things were discussed. And we asked, what could we do to make us unique? And so we started by thinking like the easiest thing to do would be to find highly rated programs and copy their curriculum. But the problem with that is that many were lecture-based and we didn't call them innovative. So after some discussion, we came up with the idea of pursuing a case-based and team-based program. But this raised a problem. There were very few existing public health cases, and faculty was unfamiliar with this style of teaching. So we came up with a solution to these problems, have students author the cases after we teach them how for their capstone project. And we supported faculty by training them in case teaching. As Nicole Haggerty said at the beginning, I'm a proud graduate of her case teaching instruction. So we believe that cases are an effective tool for healthcare professional education. They expose students to complex decision-making processes. A lot of you, when you inherit students from the undergraduate world, they are used to black and white. They're used to answers that the one answer for a problem, but most answers in public health are not black or white. They're shades of gray. And so the case method, we think, really helps higher order learning objectives, critiquing and evaluating and explaining, not just memorizing lists and terms, which the lecture method is really good at. So our program is 2 years and 12 months. It's a very compressed, very accelerated program designed around foundational competencies, including problem identification, priority setting, communication, and teamwork. We think we enhance the benefits of case-based pedagogy through innovative additions, including team-based and integrated workshops. The cases that we select include tasks that require sophisticated teamwork skills, which fits in with the team-based learning. So what is our program? It's a 12-month, it's cohort-based, so everybody's in the same class all the way through the day. There are no electives, there's no optional courses. Everybody takes the same thing at the same time. It's an immersive and high-touch learning environment, meaning we have a lot of staff support to help us because students find this a challenging transition from undergrad lecture-based. We support the development of critical leadership skills, including collaborative decision-making and critical thinking. Combining the case and team-based methods reflects current interprofessional nature of public health. We think that we have an authentic and relevant approach, and we produce job-ready graduates. And we know that we're being partially successful because we get some very positive feedback from employers and sooner or later from graduates. Sometimes it takes them half a year to a year to realize that what we were doing, what we put them through, was the right thing to do. And so finally, because there was a shortage of public health cases, we had students write their own cases, and now we use our own graduates' cases in our classes. Faculty work very closely together, so we all know what each other is teaching, and so that allows us to reuse the same cases, different aspects of the same cases. Students gradually learn to learn with cases. We have a spring case writing workshop where we teach students what we're looking for as they become case authors. And then as faculty, we advise them and we read up their case proposal, their first draft, and their final draft. And the best 12 to 15 each year are nominated for the casebook. And you can see the link to our no-cost online casebook.
So that's great. Thank you so much, Mark, for giving an overview. And it's incredible that in 4 or 5 short slides, Mark's able to explain what we do over the course of a year and what we've been doing over the course of the past 10 years. So I appreciate some questions may have come from that. So as Nicole, our colleague, said in the chat, please feel free to drop in some questions as you go, and we can certainly cover some of the more nuanced, how do we actually do this? But what I also want to cover is how we do this, how we do team-based pedagogy. So we very much value the case-based pedagogy, and we augment it using team-based pedagogy. And so we believe firmly in the importance of team, not only because of the value, as we indicated earlier, towards public health, but in how it helps students learn and become what we believe is more effective learners. So why teams? Okay, so I mentioned our program emphasizes the case-based learning, and we also emphasize team-based learning. So we believe, that teams encourage individual and team-based reflection. Students become more accountable for their learning and for the learning of those in their learning team. So we have what we call LTs, or learning teams, which we'll unpack a little bit in a few slides. And it's been shown in the literature around team-based learning that team-based learning can enhance students' ability to be more self-reflective. So they reflect on the current interprofessional nature of public health, but also their role within it. It supports critical leadership skills, including collaborative decision-making. If you recall back to one of our first slides, that is one of the skills we would like to equip our students and we think is important to succeed in a public health field. So how do we do learning teams? So we do permanent 6-student teams, LTs, as I mentioned, who all have a faculty advisor, which Mark also alluded to. And these LTs are formed by our program faculty and staff based on trying as much as possible to balance characteristics. So things like gender, country of origin, educational professional background, years of experience. And these groups come together. They have their own room, their own physical space on campus within the building, and they work together daily. They work together from 1 to 4 p.m. and that's an opportunity to both reflect on the work that they've done in the morning in their courses, but also to prepare for the next coming days. Learning teams complete team-based assignments across most of their classes, including reports that are team-based and also presentations. So I think this wouldn't be a case presentation without talking about the importance of preparation and learning over the time. So as Mark mentioned, this information on the left side of the slide, our students come together and come from various levels of preparation, pre-work, right? We got a lot of students who are just graduated and they come with their own skill set. And we have students who are coming from professional backgrounds and certainly bring their own skill set, as well as the breadth of experience across our student body. So in a typical case setting, what we would expect is that students are spending a lot of time learning as individuals. So they're reading their case, they're reading their preparatory material if there's extra reading, and maybe even trying to fill some gaps around some of the background knowledge. And so our LT groups come in this small group discussion, and that's when individuals can ask questions, fill in the gaps that they didn't quite have when they were either reading or trying to understand the case, or with some of that background knowledge. And then the large group is where the magic happens. We bring everybody together and the learning teams have discussed and pre-worked, and hopefully we're able to take their learning to a much higher level in the classroom when we get them to that large group discussion. But we found 2 challenges, right off the bat. So we have this challenge of students need to be responsible for their learning right away. And so for some students, that's not a problem. For others, it's a little more challenging. But the challenge we want to talk to you a little bit more about today is this idea of teams need to be high functioning fast. So they need to know how to work in a team well. And it's a presumption that students will come to us with that skill of knowing how to work in a team. So since we believe so firmly in the importance of team-based learning as it relates to case-based learning, we spend a significant amount of time helping our students become high functioning or learning to become high functioning. And one of the ways we do it is through our really cool simulations, which Mark is going to talk to you about.
Thank you. So you can see here a shipwreck and a wildfire, and those are the 2 simulated survival exercises that we've used most to date. If I could have the next slide, please. So our question was, what proof is there that teams make better decisions than individuals? There are papers in the literature addressing this. This has been approached using a number of methods. We wanted to use these simulated survival exercises to obtain empirical evidence of improved decision-making by teams versus individuals. And so we've done this. We did this over 3 cohorts, the same survival exercise in the fall and the same one in the winter. across 3 cohorts, and there are 10 learning teams of 6 students each. So we have a pretty decent sample size for the following statistics. First of all, what defines a better decision? Well, in the survival scenario of approaching wildfire or a shipwreck, the students are given lists of 12 items that are available for them to use, and they have to rank those 12 items in terms of how useful they would be for their survival in either a wildfire or a shipwreck. First, they rank them individually with no discussion, and we have learning team advisors in the room to be sure that nobody's yakking and nobody's on the internet. After they've ranked them as individuals, then they rank them as a group using discussion. And so then what's the criterion of a good decision? There are experts. The experts have ranked these items in terms of how useful they would be. And so then we subtract the individual ranks and the team ranks from the experts' ranks, and we sum them. And this produces a gain-loss score. And that measures the difference in the individual versus the team decision-making. And a positive gain-loss means teams are better than individuals. So my next slide is busy, but it's actually not that bad. First of all, you can see the cohorts on the in the rows, and the September and winter in the main columns. And so what we have here, basically, I'll direct your attention to the gain-loss column. We see that in the fall, the first year, 2018, actually, individuals were slightly better than teams. In the other 2 years, teams were slightly better than individuals, but it's not a big effect. It's so close to zero, it's almost zero. But when we look at January, the gain-loss score is huge, and it's consistent across all 3 cohorts. So as far as we know, this is the only empirical evidence of this type, using an expert's ranking as a criterion of a good decision, that really shows the growth in decision-making ability over a 4-month period. So is this my slide, Shannon? I guess it is. We think that this shows better decision-making in teams compared to individuals, and it definitely improves over time. The simulation is consistent with the current qualitative literature. Simulations provide authentic and collaborative decision-making experience that is low stakes for students. They know they're not actually going to die, but they can imagine themselves in a situation where they're facing very important decisions, and it really does bring them up to pay attention in these exercises. We think this prepares students for the demands of the current healthcare system and public health landscape, and it helps students clarify roles and responsibilities among team members in a safe environment.
All right, I'm going to chat, a little bit just about some of the bigger picture conclusions from this work, and then also just kind of sharing some other contexts in which, this team collectively has been doing some things, seeing everyone on the chat, you're all coming from different places around the world in different contexts, which is amazing. So in terms of the challenges and future directions, I mean, I'm not sure, I should say, I'm sure many of you have experienced, some of these different challenges, but we're just going to share a little bit of what we've encountered so far. So one of the biggest pieces, especially at our institution, and again, I think this is shared at many Canadian institutions, but I'd be curious in the chat to hear what it's like around the globe. In terms of the ethics associated with any sort of research like this, it can be really, difficult. I think that, things are getting better and the processes are becoming more clear, but they're still quite intensive. And, a lot of times, some reflections that have been shared by especially educators is that, if we're wanting to go back and look at things like any sort of retrospective analysis, it becomes difficult because our groups want us to obviously, make sure that there's informed consent and that people can be part of that process. But it's not always a possibility. And if we try to think of it, ahead of time and work towards making sure we get that consent, again, it can be a really, time-consuming process and something where, just really difficult overall. And so one of the pieces that I think many people are hopeful is that maybe there's a way that some sort of evaluation can be included, especially when we start thinking about quality improvement, and just thinking ahead to getting feedback so that we know what can we do next and how can we move forward. Other pieces that we've been kind of, having some challenges, I guess, or things that we have to consider is just publishing in general. And so making sure that we can find an appropriate journal and, how do we write this work up? It's got to have a specific angle. There's obviously different audiences. And so that's something that we've been exploring. And I think Shannon has told us most recently that we are working our way towards hopefully being able to share some of this work, disseminate it. But it took a long time, right, to be able to go back and revise that. And I'm sure a lot of you have shared that as well. This type of work is obviously taking a snapshot in time, but I think any sort of piece would be nice to add in the longitudinal. So especially with the public health program, these students are going out into a placement even, or they're going out into the workforce after, or maybe they're continuing with their professional studies. And so being able to follow them long-term to see what that looks like and how their teamwork and how their, for example, conflict management or anything like that looks like in the real world would be really fascinating. And then the third piece being kind of the explanatory and digging more into the qualitative piece. I think many of us get comfortable with the quantitative, but I know myself, I'm trying to really embrace the qualitative side and be more comfortable with that, even though my training, was very much in a quantitative field. And so I think that that's where we can really start to interview students, do focus groups, even with our faculty as well, and try to understand the why a little bit more. And then the next little thing I'm just going to kind of share, like I said, some things that are happening in some other programs, because I think it's all related to this umbrella of, both the case-based as well as the team-based learning. So one of the pieces that our group, and this is just something I'd be curious to hear in the chat if anyone's doing this type of work, is we've all kind of reflected that, when it comes to any sort of teamwork, you've got students who inevitably will experience problems, and you as an instructor or an educator will hear about them. And then there's these other teams that exist and they just kind of manage. And I think we sometimes assume they didn't have conflict, but I think that would be naive to assume that. It's likely that they've either got processes in place that are set up to maybe avoid some of that conflict, or maybe they just have those skills that they're able to navigate that a little bit better than some of the other teams. And so, Shannon mentioned this at the beginning about, the necessity for these teams to be high functioning and to be able to, work effectively and efficiently. And so we are really interested in the future about this idea of a high functioning team. And, what makes a team successful? Well, the opposite can be asked too, right? What makes them unsuccessful? And why is it that there might be some people, that are experiencing these different pieces? I see someone in the chat saying a healthy level is good, right? With the conflicting views. And I agree completely. And, I think having students, educating them about, for example, that conflict will be inevitable, and then maybe giving them some evidence-based solutions so they've got it in their back pocket so that if they do encounter those circumstances. So those are just some of the pieces that we want to continue to explore, because I think that's a lot of times why students come into team-based learning with a negative, association. They've been burned in the past, or they've had bad experiences. And so, oftentimes you don't get to pick your team, and yeah, conflict is inevitable. So how can we bring this into our classrooms and into our teaching so that we can really set them up for success in the future? So on the next slide, I just want to talk a little bit, because I'm coming from a slightly different context. So I'm not involved with the teaching in the Masters of Public Health program, but as I said at the beginning, I work with a group called the Interdisciplinary Medical Science Students, and we have a huge focus of team-based learning in our program. We talk a lot about, again, the wicked problems and the fact that you need interdisciplinary approaches to solve these complex issues. And, we talk about how important important having a diverse team and having, different people, different perspectives at the table, because that's the way you're going to really come up with those, novel and innovative solutions to these challenging problems. So I just wanted to share a couple of things that I do with my group, and I love following up with people about these things. So if anyone, wanted more information on this, I have lots of templates and different things that can be shared. So one of the first ways that I got involved with teamwork was actually through doing these escape activities. So very similar to what the public health group is talking about here. We want to simulate these environments. We want to put them in these challenging situations. We want to make it kind of fun so that the first time you're working as a group, it's not on a major essay or something where your grade's at stake. And so we made these escape boxes. And during the pandemic, we made an online escape activity as well. They had a science theme to them just because that's what my background was. But that's kind of one of the first things that I got involved with. The next one is the ethical decision making. It's actually through the simulation is offered through the same company that the bushfire and the other activities that Mark was talking about. So this human synergistics group. So one of the things we do is we purchase the research ethics board simulation, and the students have to sit around and rank the 10 practices, and they're usually just a sentence. So they're very short phrases, statements, and they have to use their knowledge to try to, again, they rank them individually, they come together as a group. So very similar activity as before, but getting them to think about ethical decision making, and again, very fascinating. And then down at the bottom, 2 others using clinical case studies. So I teach a lot in lab environments, and so being able to, mock up some scenarios and getting them to work through it as if they were a practitioner. That's another simulation that we do. And then the last one is a grant panel review, and this is about, if you're going to have students maybe working on an assignment or something where you might want them to write a proposal, for example, taking it a step further with that simulation and that team-based activity to think about any sort of funding agency and how they might set that up. So just a couple different pieces. And again, always happy to chat about it. So on my last slide, what I wanted to just kind of, drill home as a point is that I think, what makes or breaks these types of things and the way that we can get students really excited about these things. I mean, simulation is a form of experiential learning for sure, but really just linking in the authentic learning activities. I think that's where you get students, engaged. You can see a couple photos here used with permission, that, students are having fun with these activities. They're working together, they're helping each other out, they're really focused. So on the left is the escape activity, on the right is the ethical decision making. And, really just being able to guide students through the process. So giving them the opportunity, but then also thinking about things like teaching them project management, giving them project charters, team charters, where they can write up documents, be accountable to one another. So those are just a few of my kind of lessons learned about how we can really help students through this process. And I think now I'm turning it over to the other Nicole.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, team. So I am really excited to be able to share some thoughts. I was just looking through my old file folders online and thinking to myself, in 1 month, it will be 10 years since the first time I had a chance to work with the Master of Public Health faculty, the interdisciplinary faculty, and deliver a How to Teach with Cases workshop. It was December 6th and 7th of 2012 that I had a chance to do that. What I love about what my colleagues have shared here is how you can design from scratch, your ideal program. You could start from scratch. What would the ideal program be in terms of crafting a programmatic curriculum that embraces case-based pedagogy and team-based learning activities? And it's a wonderful luxury. Most of us are not, I was going to say stuck. That seems awfully negative to say, but most of us inherit programs and courses that we teach. And so what I want to talk a little bit about is just a few things for people in other disciplines to think about as they think about how to enrich their current practice. It seems like there's a lot of already experienced case teachers who are with us on the call. That's great. It seems less so with case writing. I'll talk about that And I want to talk about how we think about implementing some of these ideas into a pre-existing course or pre-existing program. So just before I get started, what I'm going to do is invite our participants who are online. I'd love to hear the kinds of challenges you faced, whether it's recently during the pandemic or in your own practice, challenges you faced with taking your case teaching to the level that you want, or uh, case writing, whatever those challenges or opportunities are. I'd like to see them in the chat, see if we can't respond to some of them. So I'm going to talk about recommendations for integrating case-based education into other educational settings. And so I have a very strongly held philosophy that case-based education and experiential methods are possible everywhere. So I just don't think there's a place where you couldn't put them. Cases can be developed for any subject in which we would expect our students to act with the knowledge that we teach, right? So that's my working proposition is that we can use these methods, whether they're team-based learning, case-based learning, to focus on the value of teaching actions and behaviors in our students. So there's knowledge, there's skills, and then there's acting in the world. And so I've had the opportunity to work mostly with management and business, of course, but I've worked with faculty in engineering, law, of course, medicine, nursing. I actually teach and incubating and accelerating innovations in global health to master students in our School of Medicine and Health Sciences. I've worked with faculty in journalism to think about writing cases and teaching with cases. And I forgot to put it on here, but I was just reflecting recently about 6 years ago, I had the opportunity to deliver workshops over a week and a half at the University of Central Asia in Kyrgyzstan. And these were largely to faculty who were teaching math and English and science. And they were developing cases because they wanted students not just to learn base knowledge, but how to act with that knowledge. And they were using case-based education to do it. So it's possible in any setting. And I just wanted to lay that out there, that the way to think about it is, what kind of action do I want my students to be capable of engaging in? So what are some, if we go to the next slide, some of the things that I think are, that when you're in flight in a program, what are some of the things that you need to think about? And the first thing I think you need to think about is, where are the faculty at? Where are you at as a faculty member? Where's your school at in terms of supporting you and other colleagues to do embrace some of these things? And I think it starts with development and mentoring activity around case teaching and writing. It's let's face it, it's much easier to work on a lecture where you have much more control of what you're going to go into the classroom with and use it. Teaching with cases and writing your case material that you're going to bring into the classroom really demands a lot. And from a faculty perspective, I think learning certain things, the things I think are really foundational to allowing students to develop their best selves out of this method, really focus on at least 4 things. The power of questioning. How do you get good at questioning students? Because you need to ask the right question to get them to come back to you with, answers that have really engaged their analytical reasoning and their critical thinking. It was very demanding on our listening skills, because we have to be able to listen and respond to what they're saying, listen and to remember what others have said, to draw that in again to the discussion, to fully develop the capability of students. And it demands good responding, right? That we've listened to what students have to say, and that we're able to respond in our own way back with sort of critical reasoning and critical reflection. And then finally, evaluation. It changes, these kinds of methods change the way we undertake evaluation. I think particularly of contribution evaluation at the end of a class where I've engaged in this. How do I assess student performance? And I've learned to do that across groups of about 80 students in in 80, 90-minute classes. And so it can be done. So I think the other thing that faculty need are practice and learning. This kind of engaging with these kinds of methods, it's different, be a little bit scary, and having an environment which you feel you can practice these things, learn from each other, create a community of practice in your discipline group, in your department, within your school, I think is a really valuable investment. And then finally, supporting faculty and figuring out your own way to balance these new teaching activities with the other work, other responsibilities that you might have, research and service. And so there's a set of faculty needs to think about. And then the final thing is, or the other side of the equation is, what do you walk into the classroom with? So I think, although I work in a place where 80 or 90% of our content is taught with cases, when I work with most faculty, I'd say identify 10 or begin with 10 or 20% of your lessons where you might be able to, that's sort of like 1 in 5, 1 in 8, 1 in 10, start small, where you want to pause the learning in your course and explore how your students have learned to act with the knowledge. So identify some lessons where that is going to fit. And then the other thing I recommend people do is to check out textbooks for ideas on the timing and pacing of when you can bring a case in. So textbooks are great places to get ideas, right? If I've covered this much content, the textbook usually ends with a mini case or, some mini exercises. Those can be turned into maybe case-based, case-like discussions. And they're great for saying, okay, if I've covered this much content, now it's a good time to bring a case in. Then you've got to find cases, right? So the case case center, there are case libraries that you can go to find them. My colleagues have cases that they've developed that they make available for free. I've found those resources in some other places. Of course, if they're available online, it does mean that students also have access to them, right? So there's always a, how do I make use of materials where students might have access to solutions? I've got some thoughts on that if anybody's interested in them, but other kinds of places you can look for cases, and Mark talked about this, check the headlines. I could show you as we were talking, I was thinking about what would the headline be I might grab out of today's newspaper. And because of the business, I teach in business, and because I'm curious about technology, I went to BBC, Al Jazeera, New York Times, and the Globe and Mail, which is a Canadian-based newspaper. Every one of them has a story about Elon Musk, his takeover of Twitter, and particularly this morning, his move to create an $8 a month fee for people with blue check marks, verified and heavy users of Twitter. I find very interesting his effort to monetize. You could take that case in a lot of directions. And if you ask students to keep an eye on it, you can then refer back to it, right? As your case goes, the situation unfolds. Final thing I'd mention is teaching students how to learn from cases. That's a practice that when you're bringing cases into your course, and if many faculty are, that's great. You can get students to start thinking about learning across different subject areas. If you're the only one, you definitely need to spend some time to show students, how do you learn from a case? How do you read it? How do you approach doing analysis from it? How do you work with your team, a team of learners, to draw insight from it? And how do you get ready for coming into class with it? So those are some of the thoughts on developing and launching while you're in flight. I'm sure there's other activities. We've got about 15 minutes left, so I'm going to ask if Shannon, if there's questions that have come into the chat that we want to talk about.
There's been some great discussion around some of the challenges. So the question that you posed, what are the challenges? So Anna and Amy, thank you for contributing. And I just see David has also started to contribute. So some good discussion around the challenges. Happy to kind of read some of them, or if folks want to come off mic and discuss, we can absolutely open the floor to discussions and questions that might have come up, or I know we also have a little bit of a backup plan if there's not a lot of discussion. So how about we try that? Any questions that want to be covered, that people would like to ask?
Yeah, so I see some that are in the chat, and I'd love to hear the voice of some of those out there that have posed challenge that they'd like us to talk about.
Hi, this is Ami here, and thanks. This is a great session, and I think we all think about this very often. So, this is the thing. Engaging a student is to me a hygiene factor, because that's effectiveness of teaching. And that is, of course, critical. But what I find sometimes is that, because there is a learning outcome, that the aim is the learning outcome, and it could be anything. In some case, in a simulation, it could be even teamwork, it could be anything. It could be dealing with crisis, dealing with ambiguity. And attached to that is them learning, or at least being able to rely on frameworks to support past knowledge and use that and adapt it to a situation they face at workplace. I'm from practice, so I have 20 years of practice, and then this is my second career. So I guess I've learned one thing, that if you're very sound in your basic framework understanding, you can use it to adapt it to multiple situations. And the risk with casework sometimes is that students only know how to work in that particular situation. So as a faculty, it's very important to make it broad-based. That is, you don't want them stuck to the situation. You want them to learn how to apply, to understand a framework. The case is only a tool for them to so that is a very important focus for me. To be able to do that and to engage in class, some amount of pre-reading and pre-learning is very important. And what I find is you always are in a class where some have read and some haven't, and then you don't know how to hold the class together, because the ones who have read, if you're going to explain everything or give time, then those who have read are, spending time. So there is that engagement factor. So sometimes I instead, for undergraduate, instead of making them read, the youth are not used to reading, I do a video. So I use if I prescribe the test book, a lot of the books do have video cases. So I use them. So, sometimes adapting so that you focus on the frameworks and things like that. That's the things I do. But I don't know, there's no easy solution, but that's my thoughts.
I'm going to just chime in with just a few thoughts, and thank you so much, Ami, for sharing that. Number one, there are multi-forms of cases, ripped from the headlines, YouTube videos, traditional cases that are in writing. Know your audience, know what you can get from them, I think is really important. Secondly, about frameworks, I think that you pointed out a really important thing, which is teaching a case is not just telling a story. It has a learning objective, and that learning objective should be tied to evidence. And I always, it's one of the reasons I like writing cases, is because I can write the teaching note. I know exactly the tie to evidence that I have. And the third thing I'll say is, it's why having multiple cases is a good thing in a course, not just one case, because the multiple cases allow you as an instructor to make students build bridges, right? From one thing to another, to get beyond the anecdote of a situation and sort of move up to abstract thinking. What can we take from the last case to apply here? How does it apply for the framework? So I think that's a really great point. Thank you for that. Anna, I see your hand is up. What would you like to?
Yeah, thank you. I just would like to share my working with students. I mean, I did a different thing, very, very different things over the years, and also worked many, many years before with undergrads. And undergrads usually get very nervous if they don't have the possibility to read the material beforehand, and they need a week and so on. And now it's, of course, nowadays it's a problem that they go to Google or whatever, they find everything, then they have the perfect argumentation, or what, not perfect in their minds, because what they are saying, they are trying fine, they learned something. But then very often I put even undergrads in a situation when they don't have the material beforehand, and they get the case team, different teams or one team, it depends with whom, how many teams or how many students you work with. And then I have 4 or 5 hour session, and I give them the case. It's usually about 30 minutes to 40 minutes max for reading the case, even 15 or 20 pages. And they really have to do it. Of course, the first sessions are very, very difficult, but then they learn. And they share the responsibilities with reading and analyzing the different parts of the cases and whatever. And they learn very quickly. I don't extend the deadlines. No way. It's 5 hours, that's it. And with older students, I mean, graduates and postgrad, that's easier, of course. What is important is that, and they don't have the access to the computer, to the internet. So they have to think, they have to use the knowledge they have. They have to use the way of thinking, the logic, the argumentation, the assumptions. They cannot know everything. It's impossible. Nobody knows everything, even Warren Buffett. So the situation is they really need to extract from their brains and memories what they have learned, how they have learned, what thing would work in real life. And I'm talking about business students. So that works very well. I don't need to check if they are accessing the internet or not, because 4 or 5 hours, it's such a short time. If they start Googling, it's gone, it's lost. They cannot do anything. So this is my experience. They really love it. I sometimes do the simulation in a way also that I give the roles, different roles to the students. So there might be for example, the CEO of the company, the marketing department, the labor unions. It depends on the case, of course, and the representative of some, well, I don't know, in medicine, that would be the of course, or medical industry, cannot say industries, medical institutions. It could be different. The doctors, the main doctor, and so on, so on, so on. Yeah. So you can give them the roles, and there's also a limited time for discussion, bringing the arguments. They have a short time to prepare for that. Okay, I'm finished now. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Anna. You've I think, seeded lots of great ideas for how to cope with some of the common challenges that we have. And if you have the time of being able to put them in the situation, have them read it right away, like just give it to them in the moment. You know, give them time to read it and then engage in the discussion. You're going to place demands on their analytical reasoning, their ability to absorb information, analytical reasoning. So lots of great learning goals that come from that. The other thing I would add is, you know, as case writers, we have some opportunity to bring new cases into the mix, and that they can't Google, and that's the rip from the headlines also can't be Googled, and it doesn't require much to adjust it so that there's a lesson that you can ensure that you can extract from it. But I love all of those ideas. Ami, I see your hand is up. What would you like to share?
Just one more thing. Often cases tend to be group assignments because they are, as you progress in the scaffolding, they are more critical thinking. So you want them to be able to. But there you come with the challenge of free riders. So because your aim is learning outcome. It's not whether it's a free rider or not, but a free rider may not be learning. So then we do things like I cold call a group, and within a group a person, because then the person, anyone, sometimes I don't allow the whole group to present. I just cold call one member, or I'll raise a question to one member, things like that. That's a challenge also I face, because you still need to assess each. If you're doing a summative exercise, formative is fine, but if you're doing summative, then you need to assess each student, and you're instructing at the same time. So I don't know, it would be good to know what other tools can be used to be able to understand how much each student has learned in a group.
Great. Thank you, Ami. I'm going to invite my colleagues, if there's anything that they would like to add, either on some of these challenges we've heard, but also this last question of what are different forms of evaluation, because I think the MPH program itself and the way they've structured it has some great thoughts on that.
It's hard. I think that's the bottom line. It's hard to do that, and you can use carrots or sticks, I guess, is the end of it. So we put a lot of thought into how we do evaluation of teams and how we implement team grading into a course. So I might not get the percentages right today, and I'm happy to again follow up. And we actually have a published paper on this as well, so can share that link with you as well. But essentially, like the quick and dirty, the 30,000 foot view is we teach our students how to evaluate each other. So how to do peer evaluations through one doesn't count for anything formative evaluation. They get to practice the giving their peers grades. So how well their peers are doing at supporting their learning. So we again try to emphasize it's not about how well your peer is doing at getting an A, but how well your peers are doing at supporting the learning in the learning environment. And then that becomes part of their course grades. So as we pointed out, our cohort-based group has 8 to 10 courses. So each course has a 15% grade value for teamwork that is from peer evaluation. So yeah, and we've thought about it. And I mean, I think we still sit, Mark, you can probably concur, we still sit at meetings going, are we doing this the right way? Is this the best way? Is there a better way? But it seems to do the trick for now anyway. So this certainly is, I don't think there's a definitive answer to how well to do it. And you've picked up on a really thorny issue that I think students sometimes don't like, the fact that they have to evaluate their peers. But Nicole or Mark, do you want to?
Yeah, so what I do, Shannon, is not in the same group. So I make the groups present and then the other groups evaluate. So, you know, if there are 7 groups, the remaining, and there's only a certain weightage, and I give them usually a rubric. So they cannot evaluate just randomly. They have to, and the rubric does have the learning outcome, the frameworks, because my aim is for them to be able to use what they have learned in a scientific fashion so that it becomes their second nature. So then, and then I also invite usually another faculty if they are presenting to also grade, and then there's my grade. So we combine all the 3 grades. The student weightage is less. It's just that they are involved and they're comfortable to grade because they're grading other groups. So some amount of competition enters, and they don't enter into a win-win agreement, which is everyone grades each other the max. Then they don't do that. So you use that conflict to your advantage. And that I have found that works well, but then you have to spend a little bit of class time on presentations and things like that.
Thank you very much for that. Sorry, Nicole, I just am looking at the time. It's 10:28. So I know that we have to hand something back to Kate. So Nicole, do you want to make a quick point?
Sure. I was just going to say, I mean, number one, I think, in some contexts, you have to think about, should students be grading each other, or is it the feedback that you care more about? And so we've switched to grading the quality of the feedback, and that's taken a lot of the stress off. And then, I think it's a complex issue, and it's something we have to think a lot about. That's all I was going to say.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Thank you for that. And sorry to have cut you off, but we've had such a great discussion. Kate, I'm going to turn it back to you from Case Center to have the final words. Thank you.
Thank you. I've been at the Case Centre for nearly 21 years now, and the discussion around how to assess, particularly in case-based classrooms, has been going on ever since I joined. So I don't think anyone ever feels they've done it perfectly. That's why we're still discussing it. So I just wanted to quickly say thank you for joining us today, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you found it very useful. Many thanks to Nicole, Mark, Shannon and Nicole for leading this session for us. We'll be in touch in the next few days with a link to the webinar recording, some of the resources that we've discussed, and also a copy of the presentation slides. We would love to hear what you thought about today's session. So there will also be a short feedback form that we'd ask you to complete, and I've popped it in the chat window too. We like to develop the webinar programme, and we're always looking for opportunities to do that. So thanks again, everybody. Have a very good evening and a very good day, and goodbye.